What's up everyone, Lance Hedrick here, and today we're going to talk about what the puck is going on with puck screens and filters in espresso. There has been a trend that has come up over the years where people use these mesh screens in order to put on top of their espresso puck. And the claim is that as water hits it, it more evenly disperses the water over your puck. So essentially what goes on is the water comes out of the dispersion screen, which a lot of people say have some inherent issues, some inherent flaws, and that puck screen itself will even out the water so it more evenly goes through your puck of espresso, giving you more even extractions and therefore more tasty coffees. Now this really became a big trend when the Flare 58 came out, and in fact, they were shipping these puck screens with their machines, even though it had a shower screen on it. People started using them and realized that it actually really helped even out the flow in comparison to the shower screen, which was undersized on the Flare 58. And in future models, they ended up taking that screen out and they rely now solely on the mesh in order to distribute the water. But is it actually doing that on a typical espresso machine? Is this something that you need to include in order to even out your extraction? Now, of course, over time, we've had different meshes come out. So like here we have one from Weber, from Flare. We have one from my friend, it's Chris, who's a YouTuber. Normcore has their own. But you also have some other types of screens coming out, like those from Swarks. These really thin little ones that you can place on top of your puck. Get over here. So we've had some evolution, even though we don't really have any basis for the evolution. What is the data behind it? What is actually going on? Do these actually improve things? Now, even before mesh screens, a very popular thing that people would do is they would put something like an AirPress filter on top of the puck, and that would more evenly saturate your puck of coffee if you have, a less than ideal dispersion screen, or if the dispersion block is inadequate, or if just the water's not coming out very evenly. We also had people start doing what are called paper sandwiches. That's putting a paper filter below the puck, so putting it in your basket, then putting the coffee on top, and then placing another paper filter on top of that. And then of course that is transformed into people using screens on top of that, and of course the billet screens on top of it. Yes, there are differences that people have noted, especially with bottom paper filters. But what are those differences and how important are they? Is this something you should fool around with at home? I pulled 6 different methods, 10 shots each. And of course, I pulled a shot of each and kind of switched it all around. First method, second method, third method, fourth method, fifth, sixth, and then kind of went back and then skipped to the end and just kind of varied it up so that any drifts in dial or all of that stuff could kind of be taken into account to reduce noise as much as possible. The first method was just naked. I did nothing on it, just no filter, no faff, just WDT'd, tamped, and pulled the shots. The second one was a dry mesh filter on top. Yes, fully dry room temperature mesh filter. So if you just take it out of your filter holder, wherever you have it, toss it on, what that looks like. The third method was I took a dry mesh screen and I blasted it with a steam wand to make it nice and warm. All right, so I wanted it to be hot, I wanted it to be wet, and that's what I was pulling with for the wet ones. Then I took the billet screen. Now the billet screen, I did not do a wet and a dry one, and it's because these dry off with a simple wipe and it doesn't hold heat. So we just did one set of 10 with that. I also did paper only on top, so just paper on top to kind of replicate a mesh screen. And then the last one was paper on the bottom, just to see how that would react. People would ask me, what do I think about puck screens? And I would say, well, I use them. There's not enough data to say if they do anything to the shot itself. What I do use it for is to lessen the headspace. So if I underfill a basket, but I don't want as much headspace, this does a good job of that. And the other thing is just for machine cleanliness. It doesn't allow as many grounds and whatnot to get up into your shower screen. Now we have the data to know what's going on. Puck screens had a statistically significant increase in extraction yield across all other methods. About 0.3 to 0.5% increase in extraction regardless. This is causing a bit more resistance, which is just elongating the shot time, causing a higher extraction. Or it could be that the water is truly more evenly dispersed through the puck, which is causing a slower extraction because it's more evenly going through the puck. If it was more uneven and it was finding channels or less homogeneous extraction through the puck, it could cause a faster extraction. With this, if it's more even, it will go a bit slower. And that's easy to see if you do multiple shots with WDT and multiple shots where you shove your finger in the middle, then tamp it, you're gonna have much faster shots with that finger imprint in the middle. Now that's an extreme example, but that's the idea here is more even extractions, screens tend to have slower extraction times. You could go coarser using the puck screen than the corollary with the same extraction yield without a puck screen, which allows for a bit more even extraction. So if your goal is 22% and you do no puck screen, no paper, no nothing, you would need to go finer than if you did the same extraction yield with a puck screen, if that makes sense. So the goal here is not to, make the highest extraction yield ever. It's to find a way to get the most efficient extraction, or to hit your extraction, your preferred extraction, with as much efficiency as possible. And with a puck screen, it seems that it improves the efficiency of the extraction, which allows you to go coarser, which allows for more even extraction, which should allow for more consistency and a better tasting beverage overall. Now, before continuing with these results, I do need to note that I was using a Swarks basket with the standard hole size at the bottom, so 0.2 millimeter holes. And because of this, I was already getting extremely high extractions. Now, the reason I did this is because it gives me more repeatable shots. Because there's not nearly as much flex in this basket, this is the least flexing basket I've ever seen. Because of that, we're not going to have as much of that low density area when that basket kind of bulges down. We're not going to have as much of that low density to cause erratic shot times or just different things that are more difficult to explain in it. Because of that, a lot of these extractions are already really high, so the movement upwards may not be that high. Now, if we were to use a more standard basket like a VST, IMS, Pullman, something along those lines, the puck screen could have a much bigger effect on it. I don't really know. I just went based off of this basket, but I think that the data is definitely applicable to other situations. That was important to say, especially as we get to the bottom paper filter. Now, if we break it down and look at the wet mesh versus dry mesh, it looks like, and this is not statistically significant, but it does look like a dry mesh filter gives you more consistency in shot times. So a more consistent output than maybe the wet ones, which actually makes a bit of sense. With the wet ones, it might be pre-wetting the top. It might be causing some fluctuations there, which can cause different shot times because you already have pre-wetted some of the grounds, and that's causing some issues, whereas the dry one is not doing that. Who really knows what's going on there? And again, it's not statistically significant, so maybe it's just some noise in the data, but it did show about a 1.5 to 2 second difference in shot times overall. I sent off my data to my friend Jonathan Gagne, who then analyzed the data, put in some graphs for me. We just threw it to him and said, here, take the data. You can use it for your stuff if you do work for me. You do want to make sure you clean these. They're very difficult to clean. I'd recommend an ultrasonic bath. You can buy them for kind of cheap, something for jewelry. Cafiza baths don't get it all out. The billet screen did increase shot time, but it did not increase the extraction yield, which is really interesting. It makes me think that this is not actually doing what the mesh screen is. If the mesh screen was just making the extraction time longer, then we would expect to see the similar extraction numbers on the billet screen, but the billet did not do any higher extraction than just a naked espresso puck. Do a great job of keeping your machine clean, but they might be causing longer extraction times, forcing you to go more coarse. It may not be giving you a more evenness at all, because it looks like the extractions are roughly the same as nothing at all, which means if we're getting a longer extraction time with the same extraction yield, it could even be a little bit more uneven because we're having more contact time with the same extractions. I do love them, but they are not doing the same thing that the mesh screens are. The top paper filter gave essentially the same times, the same extractions as nothing on top at all. I guess you could use them if you want to keep your machine clean, but that's just going to add some paper waste. Interesting thing is when we look at the bottom paper filter, we do not have what is expected to be higher extraction yields. That is what has been preached about bottom paper filters, and that is why I brought up we're using the Swarks basket. Already has a much wider surface area than a standard basket. The preaching for bottom paper filters is mostly for these type of standard baskets because the bottom is a much smaller surface area than the top. So it's not allowing the full bottom of that puck to truly extract wholly. This big wide margin around the edges where coffee can't escape. So it's over concentrating this outer ring of the basket, causing under extraction on the edges. Now, when you widen out the bottom of the basket and you bring holes all the way to the edge, as the Swarks basket does, then you are opening up more potential extraction areas, which is going to give you those high extraction numbers that we see in my graphs, which is about 23% overall. The same shots dialed in the same way with this is probably only going to give us like 21% or so. So when you put a paper filter in this, you have a drastic increase in that shot extraction. With these, you do not see that increase, but you do see a faster shot times overall. And in fact, the way that I was pulling my data was using the Unica Pro, which which is using flow as a major factor in the extraction. We won't get into that, but essentially, whenever it hits its peak pressure, it lessens flow in order to allow the pressure to kind of curve on its own. We had a sharp decrease in pressure whenever we used the bottom paper filters, whereas all of these other ones maintain 9 bar the whole shot. There's a lot less resistance going on when you have that bottom paper filter, which can be a great thing actually. You can open up the surface area on the bottom of the puck, which will allow for a better extraction. Did a full video on the baskets right here where I pulled a ton of data with any basket that's not one of the quote unquote fancy baskets. So I recommend using bottom paper filters if you're looking to improve your shots and you don't want to shell out money for the nice baskets. The nice baskets do not need and do not improve from bottom paper filters. Arguably, you could say they do if you have a flow first machine. They were making really nice shots here when I had the descending pressure, but on flat 9 bar machines, I don't recommend if you have a fancy basket to use bottom paper filters. I don't think it's going to do much except keep the basket clean because these little holes can be a little difficult to clean. The 0.2 millimeter, especially on the Swarks, 0.3 on the Weber basket is much easier to clean, but when we use a paper filter, we're getting a much higher flow at the end on standard 9 bar machines, which can actually be kind of negative to the final cup unless you have a really effective paper filter. The paper filter can help hold back some of those particles that can cause astringency in the final cup, but those can still get through the paper filter. They're not, fortresses that hold back everything. This puck, when you use a bottom paper filter, you are increasing the surface area, so essentially you're reducing the resistance that the puck can give you whenever water's going through it. When you reduce that resistance, you're going to increase the flow rate in order for it to hit 9 bar. I have a machine that will flip to flow rate, so instead of that flow increasing, the pressure will dip. So on all of my shots with the bottom paper filter, the pressure dipped pretty radically, and it gave me similar extractions because it's more efficient at extracting and doesn't need the same amount of time or the same amount of flow to achieve the same extraction as with nothing on it or with the top paper filter or the top billet screen. You can rewind that and watch it again if that was confusing. I think we got the gist. I don't want to belabor the point anymore, so let's move on. Whenever we're looking at all of this together, there is now finally some data that we can stand behind that is some statistical significance about it to really understand whether or not these kind of tools are beneficial. Of course, nothing's beneficial if you don't want to spend the money on it, or if you don't have the money for it, don't worry about it. They're not need to have. So that's all I have for you today. I know, very short video. It's kind of weird because normally when I spend this much time collecting data, those videos turn out to be 40 or 50 minutes. But today we're keeping it short, sweet, and simple to get you right to the point on whether or not these do anything for you. So I hope that it was very helpful. Now, my methodology, the approach to how I collected the data, as well as the graphs and everything else, I'll have in the caption below. So you can go check that out. You can see what materials I used and, you can check it out. I also wanted to thank So Coffee Roasters, which is a local roaster to me. They donated a few kilos of this washed Colombian coffee for me to use for this experiment so I could have the same batch of coffee roasted on the same day so that I would have as little inconsistency as possible during my shots. It took me, 7 hours of data acquisition yesterday and a lot of analysis, working with Jonathan, all of that good stuff. If you could hit the like and the subscribe down below, that would do a lot of good for this channel and for me personally. And I promise, with that trust, I will continue to improve videos and to make more data, available to the public and continue to provide coffee stuff that's not found elsewhere on the internet. Check out my Patreon below where we do a lot of competitions to give away awesome coffee machines that I use in my videos. And we also have a Discord connected there where we go a bit more in depth on a lot of the videos, as well as just on coffee science and coffee in general. Also, I have a second YouTube channel I just started called Lance Hedrick Unfiltered, where I post lives that I do for my Patreon. So if you want to get in on those lives, you can join the Patreon as well. Otherwise, I post them all there, so hitting a subscribe for that channel would also help me a lot. So check that out. Check out the stuff in the caption. Helps a lot. Love you so much. Hope you brew something tasty today. And cheers.